Welcome to the Fierce and Fit Mentor Podcast. I'm your host, Clarice Yao, a holistic health coach dedicated to helping women over 40 achieve their fittest, fiercest selves. Each week, we'll dive deep into the unique challenges of menopause, including belly fat, weight gain, muscle building, hormonal imbalances, and more. These episodes are recorded live from my free Facebook group, Fierce Women Sculpting Powerful Bodies and Champion Mindsets. Be sure to check the link in the show notes to join our incredible community and access free content, challenges, and resources designed just for you. All right, this is live number 167. This topic is your growing waistline, the real story behind it. And we're going to talk a little bit about insulin resistance and prediabetes, partially because I am working with someone who is pre-diabetic, and I know quite a few people that I've mentioned to that you potentially may be struggling with insulin resistance. So we are going to talk about this topic today and then also touch a little bit on belly fat. Now, I named this not a belly fat live, although of course we know when your waist widens, it's probably because you likely have some belly fat, but I really want to talk a little bit more around the topic of prediabetes and insulin resistance, which for a lot of you in your 40s and above, you are likely going to be experiencing this type of situation. And there is a little bit of truth, of course, that as you age, if you compare yourself to like 20 years old, your hip does get wider a little bit, but it's not just the hip. We're talking actually about the belly. So yes, your hip does widen a little bit over time. That is true, but you know that the widening is one thing, but the fat on your belly is the other thing. So this is kind of what I'm targeting, okay? So we're gonna go through some wins and then we will jump into the topic. So I want us to give a huge congratulations to these following 4 ladies. They all went into the transformation program, okay? So the transformation program is my highest level custom program. It's my one-on-one program. And this is where you get the custom macros, custom calories, and you get the individual attention to your food, your nutrition, and the analysis of your body and, you know, how to help your belly fat drop. So these are the 4 ladies, okay? Please give them lots of hearts. It's Pam Dennis, Sandy Cortez, Claudia Avil, and Sandra Woodard. So Pam Dennis is a previous FFF client, a previous Fierce Factor formula client, and she was about 2 years ago, and she was really, really fit. And then she left the program and she started gaining weight. Exactly like what we're going to talk about on this live. She was very, very fit and she loves working out, but she started gaining weight and she's like, I don't understand. And she's following a lot of her friends at the gym who are 40 something and says, you need to drink protein shakes. Yeah, some of you listening know what I'm about to say, but I won't say it right now. And so she started gaining weight. I think average she gained 15 pounds from when she left my program to her doing it on her own. And now she's come back and she's like, I need to get this fat off. So Pam, I'm super proud of you. Sandy Cortez, previous competitor, super proud of you. She competed in 5 years. So she is no stranger to the competition stage, no stranger to knowing how to, be her fittest self. However, with time and age, she's gained quite a bit back. And this is the common trend. You guys hear this, right? She competed a while back, but now she's gained it back. Rosalinda, if you're on here, you remember you competed at 57 and you were your fittest, and then you started gaining it all back. Notice the trend, guys. All of these women, no matter how lean or fit or they competed, they all gain weight back, and especially in the belly. So Sandy, we are super proud of you that you're in the transformation program. Give her lots of hearts. And then Claudia Avil from Mexico. Woohoo! She's in Texas now, and she's actually not from Mexico. She is from Mexico, but she lives in Texas now. But she's technically my first Mexican client, so I love that. She is actually pre-diabetic, and so I think this live will be amazing for her to listen to. So she has gone into the transformation program, and Sandra Woodard needed to take a break and she's officially starting now, so I'm proud of you as well. So giving you lots of hearts, okay? So give all these ladies a big hand because they know that they need the help with losing that belly fat and the midsection gain, just like this topic is. I want to give a shout out to Sabrina Schaffer. Phyllis, your wonderful friend. I don't know if she's on here right now, but she has actually lost 43.12 inches off her body. So we're super proud of you. And she lost in this time frame 4.5 inches off her belly. And obviously she's slimming in, the back fat is down. So Sabrina, we're super, super proud of you. I know you're working very, very hard. There's my hearts. There we go. Good. And Kirsten Gentella, also in the transformation program. She is in week 5 and lost 19.05 inches. And from my metrics, Kirsten, we will verify this when we meet on Thursday. She's lost 15.2 pounds. Woohoo! Give her a hand. That's in 5 weeks. Now, I think she probably wanted to give me her original weight. And when we looked at where her weight originally was to what she is now, is 15.2 pounds down. So Kirsten, super proud of you. And just one more person I'm going to give a shout out, and then we will start. Sherry Elgersma, as you guys know, she's the amazing coach in the Bio Revive system. And I wanted to give her a shout out because, well, not only, you guys know her mom went through a serious car accident and everything, but I want to talk about her waistline drop because she has had an amazing waistline drop. She went from 39 down to 32.75 inches at her lowest. And I think she might even be less now. So she's getting down to a small waist now. You know, we're starting to get their small waist back, Sherry. So I'm super, super proud of her. And if we calculate all her waist drop, belly fat drop, she's dropped 18.5 inches off her midsection. So it was 6.5 at the belly, 6.5 above the belly, and 6 below the belly. So amazing. So give her lots of hearts. So give these ladies all lots of hearts. And why do I do the celebration? Well, one is to let you know there is a way. Yes, and that there is hope, that you don't have to live with this widening waistline and belly fat forever. I mentioned it yesterday. Is it a lot harder to get it down and get it smaller as you age? Of course, but it is not impossible. And you don't need to be this older person with a wide waistline if you know what to do. Okay, so let's first talk about insulin resistance, okay? What is insulin resistance? So insulin resistance is a condition in which your cells become less responsive to the hormone insulin. So if this is the first time you're hearing insulin, this hormone specifically helps your cells receive sugar, okay? Glucose. So what insulin does is if there's proper reception for that insulin hormone to attach to your cellular membrane, it basically will open the gates and then sugar and glucose can go in. Why is this important? Well, your cells need sugar, your glucose. It needs that for all its activity, for mitochondria, all of this type of stuff, right? So what happens is if you become insulin resistant, it means your cells do not respond to this hormone and the gates don't open. If the gates don't open, what happens to the sugar? It stays in your blood, okay? So this is a problem. Your body's natural mechanism is to keep your blood clean. So your body's natural tendency is to want to keep your blood clean. It doesn't want these things in its bloodstream, and it can become quite dangerous, right? So if your sugar becomes high in your bloodstream, then your body has no choice but to figure out what to do with it because it cannot enter the cell. And what can it do? It's like, I don't know what to do now. Then it deposits into depots, right? Into little, we call it little closets, little closets. It deposits itself into closets, and that's where it starts to deposit into fat cells. And fat cells are more predominant in your belly fat it responds more to this insulin resistance situation, has to do with the receptors and to cortisol. So what ends up happening is if you become insulin resistant and your propensity as you age is to become more insulin resistant, it means more and more sugar gets pushed towards these fat cells, okay? And that's why this is a big topic, because if insulin resistance is not managed well, right, it starts to accumulate belly fat, it starts to cause your pancreas to overwork, all this type of stuff, then this can eventually lead to prediabetes, correct? Some of you who are pre-diabetic, and the worst case would be when it reaches type 2 diabetes, and then you need to take insulin shots and stuff like that. So why is this particularly important? Because as you age in menopause, your insulin resistance is going to go up, partially because of the hormonal change. So all of you listening, your estrogen will start to drop, and this causes a shift in kind of the sensitivity of your cells and the sensitivity of your cells to want to respond to insulin, okay? So it's almost like a natural process that starts to happen. So if you are not particularly cautious of this and your eating and your food and your lifestyle factors, this is why so many of you will start to find yourself gaining weight. How come I can't eat what I used to eat? How come you guys ever try eating something very sugary and then you feel sick? How many of you feel sick if you eat something like really sugary? It's because your body actually can't handle this anymore, okay? So this is the little bit background of why I want to talk about this. And the other thing I will preface before I go into the 12 factors that can, affect your pre-diabetic or insulin resistance. Even if you are not pre-diabetic, it does not mean you're not insulin resistant. I will tell you one thing. If you are struggling with belly fat, again, how many of you have belly fat? Put it below. Belly fat, put it below. If you have belly fat, it tells me you have likely insulin resistance. Okay? You don't have to be pre-diabetic, but you could be much, much worse towards pre-diabetes as well. I want to make one comment before I go into the 12 factors to watch out for that can contribute to pre-diabetes. And that is, you do not have to be really overweight or fat to be pre-diabetic or struggle with kind of the insulin situation. You can be kind of skinny too, I just had this conversation with Claudia and with a few other people. I used to train in the gyms for 8 years, clients, right? I was an in-person trainer, and I had so many amazing, beautiful Asian girls that are tiny from Korea. I remember it was just funny because it was this like group of Korean ladies, so tiny, and they jump on the scale and their fat percentages were high. And they were high in the 29-30%, and they look skinny. And we call that exactly skinny fat. And I asked them, and this was really what they told me. What do you eat? And they're like, noodles, the Chinese noodles, the fun Chinese noodles. So you know what? It doesn't mean if you are not necessarily like looking like fat, or you might have some belly fat, but you're not fat. Don't think that you're not at risk of insulin resistance and not at risk of pre-diabetes. It's the amount of fat that you're holding in your body. That's why body composition is important. It's less fat, more muscle that you really want, right? Okay, so now let's get to it. So what are 12 factors that can affect whether you develop insulin resistance or pre-diabetes, okay? So we're going to start with the easiest one. I know this one's easy and everyone's like, oh, I know that one, but we're going to keep going, okay? The first one is obviously genetic factors. If your family member or somebody in your family has diabetes, prediabetes, you are more likely to develop it, yes. But this can be greatly mitigated by lifestyle factors, okay? Because there is a slight genetic factor in regards to how your insulin responds. So yes, there is a little bit of that, but everything else, remember, is in your control after this. But I do have to mention there are certain people, so if you look at your family history and you have that, then you need to be particularly careful. Anybody here have a family history of diabetes or anything like that? Well, my dad is pre-diabetic, but he controlled it through food. So yes, so it could run in my family too, but I'm very cautious of food. So, okay, so number 2, okay, of how you might develop insulin resistance or pre-diabetes is you eat or drink high calorie, high sugar foods. This is not surprising, but it is something you need to pay attention to. There is a lot of things that you eat and drink. I know those of you in my BioRevive, those of you in my programs are well educated. But remember, this 17.4 thousand community is not as well educated as those of you in my program. A lot of you eat food and drink things thinking they are healthy. I'm going to give you an example. There is always this amazing, because today's topic or yesterday's topic in the BioRevive was probiotics. Probiotics is very popular and it is important for your body. But there are a lot of probiotic drinks that have immense amounts of sugar. Have you looked on them? 30 grams to 48 grams of sugar in them. This is the type of stuff that's going to get you in trouble. Okay, so be very, very cautious of what you eat, what you put in your body, and be careful of high calorie foods in the sense of like, if the food is going to add a whack load of calories to you all at once, and even a meal, so those of you who I coach, I sometimes tell you this, and you eat a massive meal, be very careful, because what are you doing at the moment when you eat a massive meal? What happens to your insulin, right? So if you eat a massive meal, even if it's healthy, okay, I'm going to even preface that, even if it's healthy, you eat a massive meal, whoosh, you're sending that sugar through the roof. So be careful of high calorie, high sugar foods, drinks, sauces. Things like that is extremely dangerous, especially as you age, okay? This will cause a lot of spikes, and what will happen is that's going to go straight to your belly fat, your visceral fat. So be very careful. Second thing in your dietary, all my BioRevive, I know you love me, because what I'm about to say, you're going to be like, oh, I'm so glad Clarice taught me this. Oh, I know. If you don't have good fiber intake, you are going to have a high propensity potentially of developing insulin resistance. Having high amounts and proper amounts of fiber is extremely important. And I know that one of my clients on here, Nikki, I know I was on her the first few weeks. Do you remember me texting you, Nikki? What was I texting you? Where's your vegetables? Where's your greens? Where's your... I texted her quite a few times. I was on her case for it, because low fiber intake, okay, means that your body does not have an ability to slow down the food's entry. Fiber is a what? It slows down food entry. So you need to ensure there's good fiber. And how much fiber? All of those in my BioRevive system, how much fiber do you need? You need between 28 grams to 35 grams of fiber. Most women only get 15 grams of fiber. So for all of you who are listening right now, you need to start figuring out how much you're getting, okay? If you don't control the fiber not only is very important for preventing insulin resistance, but it is also extremely important for estrogen. So basically the fiber helps you get rid of like estrogen waste, okay? You don't want estrogen to recycle into your body. Again, your body doesn't like a lot of toxicity in its blood, okay? So if you have recycled kind of like estrogens and overly estrogen dominance, so that's another factor. So number 1 was genetic factors can contribute to prediabetes, not having a good diet, lifestyle, eating, that type of thing, not eating enough vegetables, all that type of stuff will contribute, okay? Number 3, So this is what contributes to potentially insulin resistance and prediabetes, is physical inactivity or sedentary lifestyle. Again, this is not super surprising, but as women, we age, we have more responsibility, we have to sit more, including Clarice as well. Like, there's more things you have to do. You find yourself sitting a little bit more. And this is why as women age, because of all the situation happening in their body, they gain weight faster because you're sitting a lot. If you have a sedentary lifestyle, the reason why you might develop pre-diabetes or insulin resistance is, one, you lose muscle mass and you need more muscle for higher metabolism. But two, your body's cells actually loses its kind of sponge for carbohydrates, okay? So think of your cells like sponges for carbohydrates. The more you exercise, the more you do resistance training and different things like that, the more spongy it becomes. You have a higher carb tolerance. Okay, so I'm speaking to the choir. I know everyone on here that is in one of the programs or working out or training, you don't need to worry, but you do need to keep this in mind, because some of you that do actually work out, you have a false conception that you're okay. And the truth is, if you work out 2 hours, 3 hours, but you are sedentary the other, 21 hours, well, you're only going to go so far. So you still need to be extremely careful about what you eat and all the other factors I'm going to talk about, right? How many of you know you need more consistency in your training, in movement, in physical activity? If you need more consistency, I want you to put consistency below. And I know those of you who were on Sherry's live yesterday in the Bio Revive system, she said something at the end about consistency. And it's because me and her talked, yes? And it's very easy for people to go 2 days and not go for a couple days, and then they're good for 1 week, then they don't go train for another week, and then there's all this stuff that happens. Remember, your hormones are already changing. You're already not going to be dealing well with sugar and insulin. So the less you exercise, you're just exasperating the situation, and basically you think the sponge no longer is so spongy anymore, And one of the benefits of exercising more is, of course, you can enjoy a little bit more carbs because you are exercising more. All right, let's jump to number 4 of how you might develop insulin resistance or prediabetes is if you have either obesity or visceral fat. So everyone ask yourself, are you maybe, and obesity would be anything I think above, it would be more above 33%, but for me, anything above 30% is a high percentage fat. So if you have fat percentage above 30%, it's starting to get high up there. So if you have obesity or a lot of body fat, gave you a thumbs up, in the abdominal region, this means you're at risk, okay? So why is this important for you to know you might be at risk? Is the visceral fat, the belly fat, okay, is a very specific kind of fat. Now this live, I'm not specifically talking about all the different alpha, beta fat cells, which I did a live on. And so if you want to watch that live, you can, I don't remember what it's called, but you can just say fat live, and I'll send it to you. I did one where I talked about beta cells, alpha cells, this type of stuff. This is not today's live. However, just to simply help you understand this, okay? Visceral fat is a different kind of fat, and it is particularly metabolically active, and it actively produces inflammatory cytokines. It means it produces cytokines that gets released into your system, and these cytokines are cited in potentially cancerous cells as well. These types of inflammatory markers are called like high inflammation markers, okay? So because visceral fat and belly fat is a different kind of fat, and it releases pro-inflammatory markers into your system, this causes major situations for your body where your body now has high inflammation, which causes high cortisol. High cortisol impacts the insulin resistance. And so there's a cycle that starts to occur, and then insulin resistance then affects deposit of belly fat. and more deposit of belly fat leads to more inflammation, which leads to more blah, blah, blah. You see the cycle that's happening? So it is very crucial you learn to get rid of the belly fat, particularly the visceral fat, okay? Now, there is like subcutaneous fat. That's a little less dangerous. It's the internal fat that is like when you push on your belly, if there's like a lot of fat in there and like a lot in there, that is dangerous. That is dangerous. That is right by your organs. And again, this is not one of those lies, but I have so much to say. Just to give you an idea, is because it sits so close to the organs, the inflammation being released from the fat goes directly to your organs, and one of them goes through your hepatic portal vein, which influences like your liver, everything. Those of you in my Bio Revive, you can thank me for your liver health supplement. So, so if you have visceral fat, it is a double-edged sword. And so this is something you need to control. And I will talk about it at the end about obviously how we're going to control this. However, if you have belly fat, you are at risk of insulin resistance if you're not already slightly insulin resistant, and likely going to potentially go down the road of prediabetes if it's not controlled. Okay, so this is very important that you get rid of this. Number 5 reason is sort of the metabolic situations that start to happen. The first thing is the hormones. Okay, so in terms of the hormones, one, I said visceral fat produces sort of like inflammatory markers, but outside of the visceral fat, adipokines, which are adipose tissues throughout your body, okay, do release specific hormones that impair insulin function and the pathway. So too much adipose tissue is not good. I'm talking beyond just the visceral fat now. I'm talking about adipose tissue. So fat, maybe arm, maybe back, maybe whatever, it will release adipokines, and this will influence the hormone signal pathway that affects insulin. So this will imbalance your hormone. And then the second thing I said to you, Tracy, if you're still on here, Tracy Leong, is if you have metabolic syndromes, which are high blood pressure, elevated triglycerides, low HDL cholesterol, which means a good type of cholesterol, and just a thick waistline, these metabolic syndromes have a high connection to insulin resistance. Because if you have these things, which are called the metabolic syndrome, or they call it cluster conditions, you are very likely to have potentially insulin resistance, okay? Number 7, all right, this is the broken record coming in, 101, Clarice's 101 lesson on, everybody ready for this? Inflammation. There we go. We're going to talk about number 7, inflammation. Okay. If you have inflammation in your system and you have chronic low-grade inflammation in your system from poor lifestyle, from poor eating, you will lead to a disruption of the insulin function. Like I said, inflammation creates high levels of different hormonal signals, changes hormone signals in your body. Inflammation, I would say, in my opinion, of coaching so many menopausal women in this age group, is one of the biggest reasons why your body cannot move forward. This is why you need to control inflammation, because, again, not to get too complicated, it's not like inflammation directly affects insulin, but it's inflammation causing the cortisol, and then the change in how your thyroid operates, and then how it affects your sugar uptakes, all this type of stuff. So it's many, many reasons together, okay? So you need to learn to control inflammation to stop the insulin resistance, okay? So if you are wanting to learn how to decrease inflammation, I want you to put inflammation below, okay? And this is still related to inflammation, but we're going to move on to point number 8, okay? So, but it's still related to inflammation. Point number 8, cortisol, okay? If you have chronic stress and high levels of cortisol, this is going to lead to very, very likely you will have insulin resistance or prediabetes. Remember, you don't have to be overweight, really fat to be insulin resistant. You could be a high stress person and be insulin resistant and have prediabetes. Why? Let me tell you the little story about cortisol, okay? I know all of you watching know, or if you've watched me from the very beginning, very beginning, this is 167 live. I talked about cortisol on one of my lives. So the story of cortisol, ready for your bedtime story? Oh, okay. Sorry. I'm just having a little bit of fun here. Okay. So cortisol, that hormone, when it's present, it tells your body one thing to do. Fight or flight. Let's go. We got to run from the bear, right? This is supposed to be good. So what it does is, remember the cells, it opens the gates. Oh, more hearts. Wow, I love more hearts. And Oshoni taught me I can make balloons. We're going to make this happen, yes? Hopefully. Oh, confetti. Sorry, guys. Okay, so when cortisol is present, it will open the gates of the cells, okay? And it's going to release glucose out. And it's just loving these hand signals. So it's going to release glucose out. So sugar is going to enter the bloodstream even faster. Why? Because your body needs sugar to run from the bear. The body perceives threat. And therefore, it is saying, I need sugar in my system right now. So everything stops. It shuttles energy away from your digestive system. It opens the gates of your cells. The sugar moves into the bloodstream. And what did I say? We don't want high levels of sugar in our bloodstream for the most part. Under an extreme condition, it will save your life, absolutely. However, if you have chronic cortisol in your system, you're constantly stressed, then you're constantly releasing sugar into your bloodstream and changing even protein into sugar. There's a specific process. So guess what? Those of you who want to build muscle, high stress, not a good issue. You are now changing protein into sugar on top of that. Okay, so this story of your cortisol means that if you don't control this, this is going to create even worse response in your insulin. Because what's going to happen? What did I say? Now you have even more sugar in your system. Your pancreas is like, help! We need to get insulin bodyguards into the bloodstream to put them back in the cell. So it's pushing insulin back out into the bloodstream to try to push the sugar back into the cells, but your cells are insulin resistant, so they can't get the sugar back in. So now you have cortisol making your cells release sugar. You have insulin or pancreas trying to release insulin into your bloodstream, and suddenly you're like, oh my gosh, my body is a mess. This is what's happening. That is why one of the biggest things I say is you need to learn to control cortisol. Those of you in my BioRevive system, and even in my other programs, we talk about mindset a lot. It's very important that you learn to control cortisol, all those lifestyle habits. At BioRevive, you have to track your positive mindset. Is that correct? You have to track your maybe strategies you use for how you're managing your stress. This is why, because I know that this belly fat is beyond just food. Food is so important, but it has to do with cortisol. Yes. So hopefully this is making sense and you are liking the bedtime story about cortisol. Okay. So cortisol, we need to control this at all costs. And cortisol is not just mindset, but it's cortisol within your food as well. I don't want to get too much into it. We're going to talk about it later. But if your food is bad, what do you think is going to happen to your body? You're going to produce cortisol, right? If your food is not healthy for you, it's going to produce cortisol in your system. So it's this, but it's also nutrition. Okay. So before I dive into, Shoni said, love how you're breaking it down. It's the school teacher in me. I have to tell stories. I used to be, those of you who don't know, I was a grade 1 teacher before. Sit there on the carpet time and I read stories for the kids. So that's why. Okay, number 9 is connected as well to the previous topic, is poor sleep. Okay, so I know many people struggle with sleep, and this is a reality for menopausal women. I know. How many of you struggle with sleep? Put sleep below. Okay, this is because your hormones are changing. It does change your circadian rhythm a little bit with a drop in estrogen. It does affect your sleep a little bit, but as much as you can control it, try very hard to have good bedtime routines. One of my clients, she's not on here, but she falls asleep to her TV being on. And I know we had big conversations about this because the blue light from the TV is not going to be helpful. Okay. So you can still do things to try to help yourself with getting better quality sleep. Okay. And sleep, why is this really important and why could this contribute to potential insulin resistance? Is because when you don't get enough sleep, you will alter your glucose metabolism. Okay, your whole pathway with how glucose is utilized in your body starts to shift because it's lacking sleep. And it has connections to cortisol. Yes, we're coming back to cortisol, but it also has connections to ghrelin and leptin. Ghrelin is the hunger signal and leptin is your fullness signal. When you lack sleep, those ghrelin leptin signals are off the charts, and then your cravings start to go up as well, which then changes your glucose metabolism. That's why, how many of you notice, I notice this, if I don't have enough sleep, I want more carbs. Is that you? Say carbs if that's you. I notice if I don't have enough sleep, my body definitely wants more carbs because it changes your glucose metabolism. Okay, so put below, again, if you struggle with sleep or need help with sleep, put it below, okay? And hopefully this is helping you guys understand. And again, like I said, tag your friends if you're finding this really helpful, because one of the things Clarice loves to do is I love to teach you why. It's why is this happening? Why are you potentially insulin resistant? Why is your midsection getting wider? I want you to know why, because it leads to empowerment, because you're aware. You're aware, oh, these things I now have to be aware. Oh, these things is why I can't get the smaller waistline, This is why, okay? Number 10. So this one's a little bit out of our control, but I will bring it up because Tracy, you also brought it up. So 2 things will put you at risk of insulin resistance and prediabetes is age and ethnicity. Yes. So we already talked about as you age, you will naturally become less insulin sensitive or more insulin resistant, meaning your body just does not respond to insulin well. But number 2, ethnicity does play a role, okay? So higher risk ethnicities are African Americans. So yes, those of you in that class, you might be more at risk. Hispanics, Claudia, Native Americans, and Asian Americans, which would be like myself, Asian Canadian, or Tracy. We are all at a higher risk of potential prediabetes and insulin resistance. So this is partially genetic, and ethnicity, but it's just to be aware, and that's why you need to get the help, right? Claudia, that's why you're getting help, right? And age is very much so. I forget who has mentioned it above, but 62, you start perimenopause at 35, 40, 45. By the time you hit 50, it starts to get starting to get like intense, the menopause, the certain menopause stuff. By the time you get to 60, 62, 65, Phyllis is 70, 74. Now you're dealing with really low levels of estrogen, because it's dropped off now, right? So yeah, just to help you guys understand that. Okay, number 11. All right, so this one's an interesting one. Exposure to endocrine disruptors, okay? So what are endocrine disruptors? Endocrine disruptors are chemicals in the environment that interfere with your hormone pathways, okay? Now, this is very complex, and there is a vast amount of lists, including like, and I'll give you a few examples, but BPA, that's why so many people always say now, make sure you have plastics that hasn't had BPA in it, all this type of stuff, because we know those chemicals can cause disruptions, hormones, and potentially leading to things like cancer, stuff like that, right? It's a very, very long list, and this is slightly different from inflammatory markers, but it is still connected in that it disrupts your pathways. So I'm going to give you a few examples because it can be very extensive in this. But one of the things, actually, Jennifer, you told me how you grew up by some sort of power plant, and then you found out you have radiation sickness right now. Maybe you can type it below, Jennifer. She sent that to me. So if you're close to any manufacturing plants, or you grew up around some sort of chemical things or things like that, be very careful, because if your exposure to those things are there, you can have endocrine disruptors that cause thyroid issues. For Jennifer, she found out she has radioactive elements in her body. She just found this out through a blood test. And that's why she does struggle with thyroid issues, okay? And then another thing is pesticides and herbicides. Yes. All right, we all know this is not great for us. However, you don't know what's actually ending up in your food. This is why being very, very careful is very important. There's things like DDT. It's not really allowed, I believe, in the US or Canada anymore, but I don't know. There's people watching from the Caribbean, from Australia. So I have to say it. This is and Claudia, you're originally from Mexico. I have to say it because globally DDT is still used, okay? DDT, atrazine is a pesticide herbicide, and glyphosate, those of you from my 21-day anti-inflammation program know this. This is one of the biggest reasons why I do not like wheat, okay? Glyphosate is still one of those top herbicides used within farming practices. These types of things, when they end up in your system, disrupt your endocrine system, and they do cause then inflammation, okay? So being very careful about the types of food, that's why I want people to learn their inflammatory markers. This is why, okay? So if you don't know your inflammatory markers, put inflammatory markers below, okay? Inflammatory markers, put that below. So glyphosate, is one, and then personal care products. So parabens are used in skincare products, is a preservative. So being careful about that, because parabens can cause disruptions depending on certain things, of course. Triclosan, those are things found in some soaps and toothpaste. So again, this is why I'm very, very finicky about where does your product come from. And this includes your vitamins. Those of you who are with me in the BioRevive system, that's why I say don't just go buy any vitamins, because what if they source it from a farm that is pesticides and herbicides? You want to make sure things are sourced from a pesticide, herbicide free environment, so you don't end up having DDT, atrazine, glyphosate, blah, 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 all this stuff in your system without knowing it, right? This is why this is very, very important, okay? So being careful about these things, okay? So that's all I'll say about endocrine disruptors. And endocrine disruptors, like I say, they disrupt your insulin pathway and create insulin resistance in your body, okay? So the more natural, the more educated, the more that, that's why it's good if you have either a coach like myself who knows good brands, who knows herbicide-free, pesticide-free brands. This is really good, or your local nutritionist or natural herbalist, whatever. They usually will know very good brands, okay? Don't just walk into a store and buy some brands. Maybe I shouldn't say the brands, but yes, don't just walk into the stores and buy some of these brands, okay? So number 12, we are now on number 12. Actually, before I go on, how many of you did not know about endocrine disruptors? Maybe put it below. If you're like, oh, endocrine disruptors are new. I would like to know how many of you feel that is new. All right, and number 12, this one is just to put it out there. This is not for everybody. If you have been sick before or have definitely some illnesses. There are some drugs and things that you take that can impact whether you become more insulin resistant or not. I'm not going to go into a lot of the medication, but just if you have certain health conditions, you could potentially be at higher risk of that. So medication. Okay, so yes, if you're taking any medication, and also if you have any history of PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, or if you have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. I have one client, Debbie Levine, if you're on here, she does struggle with this. So yes, this is a bigger struggle we have to work through because it's more than just food. It's she actually has a disease. So these people also, you're more likely to have prediabetes or insulin resistance, this type of thing. That's basically the 12 things I want to cover, what potentially can contribute to prediabetes, this type of thing. I'm going to briefly talk a little bit about outside of prediabetes and insulin resistance, okay, is just a little bit coming back to hormones, okay? Just to give a little bit of a wrap up about belly fat and why you are struggling with this, okay? How many of you are frustrated with the fat in your midsection? How many of you are frustrated? Put frustrated below. How many of you are frustrated with it? Put frustrated below. So I want to briefly talk about it outside of prediabetes. Okay, so just purely on hormonal changes. Okay, so let's talk briefly about the hormones. Okay, so the thing is, the reality is, as you move into this age, menopause, your estrogen is going to drop, right? And because estrogen starts to drop, estrogen's role is to tell fat to go to kind of like your woman parts, like your breasts, your hips, your bum. When your estrogen drops, all of those signals starts to drop. That's why you lose your butt. Many of you realize you lose your butt, yes? And you're like, oh, like my shape is not there anymore, yes? But then it's a different kind of shape. You become an apple. I know some of you told me you became an apple or a tomato. And I'm like, oh, an apple or tomato because it all went here. So for some of the new people, just so you understand, when your estrogen drops, it changes your whole distribution where fat goes, and fat goes to your middle. It goes to your center. Estrogens drop creates an androgen increase, which means testosterone's relative to estrogen becomes higher. And this means you develop a pot belly. You develop a beer belly, like a guy, okay? And this is because the androgen hormones are now higher, telling it to go to the middle, okay? So this is a real hormonal change that is happening. And then secondly, because of the drop in estrogen, okay, this is probably new for a lot of you. Because of the drop in estrogen, your body is actually finding ways to create more estrogen. And what do fat cells do? Fat cells produce estrogen. So your body actually naturally wants to put more fat on, right? This sucks because you're like, what? Yeah, because your estrogen drops off, your body is actually seeking ways to get more fat to then produce more estrogen. So you're like, oh, that sucks because now it's like all this other stuff I told you is happening in your body and your estrogen is dropping off, and now your body's finding ways to try to put fat on, right? So this is to help you understand this a little bit more. So with that being said, just to help you understand that, so what can you do? Because we talked a lot about all these things. Okay, so you cannot stop yourself from going through menopause. You know, it's all part of aging and aging gracefully. So you cannot change your age. You cannot change going through menopause, but you can change your lifestyle factors, right? So I alluded to these things already, but I will talk about it briefly again. So I have a very specific menopausal approach because this is the niche that I coach. This is who I coach. These are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of women. Number one, in terms of a menopausal approach, is that you need to learn your inflammation markers and decrease inflammation in your system through food through your environment and through the products you use. Okay, so what I mean is all the stuff I said above is make sure you're taking out inflammation markers from your system, not only in the food you eat, but in the products you use. Make sure whatever you use, the companies are usually herbicides, pesticide free. They, don't have certain chemicals. Remember, you pay for what you get. Try not to cheap out too much on good products, okay? If you cheap out on good products, well, you're just putting in a whole lot of toxins, fillers, and synthetic things in your body that you don't want. Okay, so make sure you pay for good quality things. Okay, so eliminate inflammation markers from your system. See, the phone agrees with me. Again, so if you didn't put inflammation markers above and you need help with it, put inflammation below. Number 2, you need to make sure you get your nutrition on par. Okay, so what does this mean? You need to get your nutrition on par. Number 1, you need to eat balanced whole foods. You need to, again, be careful of, inflammation markers. Be careful of phytoestrogens, like too much soy, but a little bit of soy is okay, but just not too much phytoestrogen type things. Make sure your meals are macro balanced, okay? This is extremely important. Why? Because macro balanced meals, protein, carbs, and fat, I know Claudia, you're on here and I told you this, slows down the entry of sugar and the spike of your insulin. Okay, if you don't learn to balance your macros well, you're dealing with a situation where you could be eating way too much carbs in your food without knowing it. And our whole purpose is to slow down the entry of food and slow down that insulin response, okay, or the sugar spike basically. Okay, so make sure you are eating macro balance and make sure you get proper calories and macros eventually assigned to you if you're really continually struggling with this. This is the most precise. The most precise is precise calories and macros. Okay, so I'll repeat those 5 things on the nutrition portion. Make sure it's balanced whole foods. Make sure you take down your inflammation markers. Make sure you're careful of things like phytoestrogens. Number 4, make sure it's macro balanced. And number 5, make sure eventually you have proper calories and macros. Okay, how many of you listening to this believe you're like, oh, I need more help with nutrition or macros or one of these items? Put it below if it's you, okay? Nutrition or macro balance or whatever. So if you believe you need more help with nutrition, put that below, okay? 2 more items and then we're wrapping up. So number 3 is make sure you have a good muscle building program. And this is because we want to make sure that your muscle building program is able to really help you balance your hormones, okay? Remember I told you need to move to create enough carb sponginess, okay? You need to have the right amount of exercise, cardio, HIIT training. I have what I call the menopausal women training protocol. There's a certain kind of balance I like to have in your training where you're balancing these things because you need cardio. Don't take cardio out. Some of you take cardio out and only do weights. That's not good. Some of you do cardio but don't do weights. That's not good. So you need a combination of all these different things to create the right carb sponginess and yet at the same time not spike your cortisol level. This is why I call it the menopausal training protocol. So if you're like, I need to have a better understanding of like what I have to do in terms of your workouts and your programming on how to balance the hormones, just put programs below for the muscle building program. Okay, so this is something I would say nutrition first though, because that's 75% of your results. But I would say 25% your workouts, your physique, your muscles, those are really important. And if you know how to work out well, you'll be able to control a lot of hormones in your body. You'll be able to control how much carbs you can take in your system because you understand the ratios of carbs, fat, protein in relation to resistance training, cardio, HIIT training, mobility, blah, 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 all this type of stuff. There's a correlation to, that's why people who are marathon runners have a different need for nutrition than somebody who might be a pro bodybuilder, because all the foods relate to training, right? So that's why. So yes, if you want to learn more about the programs, put program below. And then finally, the last thing is lifestyle factors. Okay, so lifestyle factors you really need to pay attention to is sleep, water, and we just did a post on water this morning. You saw us post about how important water is. Cortisol, mindset, all of those lifestyle factors you need to pay attention to, because whether you have enough water in your body determines whether your body is flushing toxins out, whether the cortisol is kept low, enough sleep, all these factors. Lifestyle factors is underrated. And that's why BioRevive, you have to track that in your system for me, right? You have to track it in your sheet for me. And for a lot of my transformation programs, you guys often have to track water or different things, little habits I put in there for you, right? So those are the solutions I have. I wouldn't say it's necessarily new, but I would say the knowledge behind prediabetes and insulin resistance was a little bit more new, especially different things like, you're going to put fat on because your body needs more estrogen. Some of these things, or endocrine disruptors, these things are a little bit newer. And so it's good for you to know that if you're listening to this live and if you have belly fat and you have a widening waistline, like it's not a small waist, you probably should get some help. Okay, you should probably get some help. You can try it on your own for sure, but let me tell you, it's not an easy equation. It's a very difficult equation to do. And anyone who tells you it's easy does not understand the female menopausal body. Okay, it's not a young woman's body where I just eat less and I'll lose the belly fat. It's not just I starve myself and do a lot of cardio and I'll lose it. This situation, when you're in menopause, you notice I talked about 12 factors that cause prediabetes and insulin resistance. And then after that, I additionally talked about hormones of estrogen dropping and testosterone going up. And I didn't even get into the details of that, and thyroid. One note about thyroid I forgot to say. Your thyroid, as you hit into menopause, your estrogen, because of estrogen drops, it affects your thyroid, and your thyroid actually starts to slow down. And every cell in your body consists of thyroid receptors. So if your thyroid levels drop and your thyroid reception within every cell drops, guess what happens to your entire metabolism? Right? So that's why there's so much I haven't even covered into. So when it comes to dropping that waistline, you need to make sure you have a holistic approach, something that will look at things from many perspectives and not just one thing. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense to all of you. And if you feel like you need a holistic approach, or you feel like you need holistic guidance on how to get rid of that fat or belly fat or control the prediabetes, then put holistic below. Okay, awesome. Let's make sure there's some confettis here. I think it's gonna come. Yay! Oshone taught me this. And then like this gives me fireworks or something like that. I don't know. Anyways, yay! I got it. Okay, awesome. And if you enjoyed this live, make sure you tag your friends, drop some comments below, whatever you loved learning. Okay, see you guys next week.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fierce and Fit Mentor podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to hit the follow button on Spotify, subscribe on YouTube, or wherever you're listening so you never miss an episode. If something in this episode resonated with you, please leave a review or share it with a friend who'd love it too. Your support means the world and helps us reach more amazing women like you. Until next time, stay fierce, stay fit, and let's keep building your most powerful self.